Popcorn Poops is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/popcornpoops. Audible.com has over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you, the listeners of Popcorn Poops, the opportunity to check out their service. Today we're recommending the book World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks, narrated by Max Brooks, Alan Alda, John Turturro, and Rob Reiner. To download this or another free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/popcornpoops. Again, that's audibletrial.com/popcornpoops for your free audiobook.
My name is Dustin.
And my name is Jessica.
We are the Pumpkin Poops.
Here at Pumpkin Poops HQ, we produce a movie podcast and commentary track hybrid that may be synced up to whatever film we're talking about or enjoyed as a standalone audio program.
Today we will be watching the 1968 film Night of the Living Dead, directed by George A. Romero. If you are syncing this recording up to the movie, go ahead and start the film, and then press pause as soon as the words "An Image 10 production" fade out.
It's time to start the movie. Syncers, press play at the beep after the countdown. Ready? 3, 2, 1. And we are rolling.
Yay! Halloween!
Halloween.
I'm a pumpkin big and brown, sitting on a cold, hard ground. Halloween.
Right?
Good job.
So this is the first of 4 movies we're going to be doing through the month of October that have a Halloween theme or just horror films. I think we're doing 3 horror films and then one that's not really a horror film. It's a Halloween-themed comedy.
Don't you start yet.
That's your pick. I had nothing to do with that.
Don't even start.
But at your insistence.
But today
we are doing Night of the Living Dead, of course, George A. Romero's 1968 horror masterpiece, a seminal film.
And I think it's fair to say that it's been really difficult for us to decide what movies, because we only get 4.
Yeah.
We get
It's really tough.
2 for you, 2 for me. We've got 4 weeks in October, and it's been really hard to decide what we're going to do, especially because we both love horror movies so much. However, I don't think this film was ever a question. Like this was. As soon as one
of us brought it up, I think I brought it up, and it was a no-brainer. The other 3 we've tossed around. I think there was one other that we both were like, yes, of course. But the other 2 we played with a lot, and we said, well, we really love this film. We really love this film. And what about this one? Oh yeah, that's great. And it's going to be tough. I think that we're going to end up when it's all said and done, we're going to end up with a great month of Halloween movies, and it's going to end up like really great.
But it's so hard
because
there are so many.
But there are so many fantastic horror movies and Halloween type movies that we could have done. But there's always next year when we'll have,
of course,
4 more.
But this one, do you believe this is the best zombie movie ever made?
It's my favorite of George Romero's Dead series. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is the best. Maybe just because it is so important.
Definitely the most important zombie movie ever made.
Yes,
one of the most important horror movies ever made.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's one of the most important horror movies, and certainly the most important zombie movie ever made, because it really was the first of its type. And one thing that we'll probably end up talking about in this episode is how contemporary it still feels for a movie from 1968. And not only that, but the thing that most people talk about when they talk about this movie and other George Romero zombie films as well is its subtext and what it had to say about the time in which it was made.
What are the zombies? What do they represent?
Exactly. And what do the humans that have to deal with the zombies, what do they have to say about the human condition? What do they have to say about the human psyche and us as people? Which is really the center of any great piece of zombie fiction, is not, in fact, the living dead, but how the living deal with the living dead.
Well, and I think that zombie movies in particular are they're so well modeled for that kind of storytelling, because when you've got other monster movies, you have some sense that the monster has a consciousness, that the monster is, it's not an empty vat zombies are empty vats. Like, you can make them be whatever you want them to be.
Not just a consciousness, but a conscience of some type.
Right.
It has,
it's evil,
some
or
kind
or it's good.
Exactly. It has some kind of morality to it.
Right. Whereas zombies are just blank slates. And so
there's nothing.
You're able to paint them with whatever you want to paint them with.
They have a motivation, but no morality. They don't make decisions.
And really, our movie focuses entirely around... They're just motivators. They make the people do the things that they're going to do in the movie.
Yes, exactly.
They're inciting creatures.
It drives the story forward and allows the characters to grow and to develop and to have a transformative experience. And the situation that they're in being the living dead coming back to life and them having to fight for survival is the impetus for their transformative character moments. So and I think that's probably why, of all subgenres of horror, zombie fiction is probably my favorite. And I think
really your favorite.
Probably my favorite. I don't know what else there.
I think I love ghost stories, supernatural stuff the most. I love that kind of stuff.
Ghost stories can be great, but there's just so many out there that are just so boring, just so slow, and it just doesn't do it for me. I mean,
our definitions of boring are very different.
I think on some level I may enjoy slasher movies more,
than ghost stories, more than ghost movies.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Certainly
no
more
way.
than ghost, but on just a pure entertainment level, I think that I might like slasher movies more than horror or zombie films.
Slashers more than zombies.
Yeah, but I think on an intellectual level or on a subtextual level, or a thematic level, certainly zombies.
Slashers are kind of like my bottom. Like, slashers are like it's like torture porn and then slashers.
One of your favorites is considered a slasher. One that we're going to do this month. We're going to be doing a slasher.
I don't consider that a slasher.
It totally is.
We'll talk about it
We'll
later.
talk about it when we get there.
I don't think it's a slasher. But it's
a slasher with some brains.
I like supernatural. I like monsters.
Speaking of brains,
Barbara, they're almost coming to get you.
So the character, we've got Barbara here and her brother Johnny, who I think are just impeccably cast. And
their noses are great together.
Yeah, they look like brother and sister, and they're not. I don't think they're brother and sister in real life, but they're both blonde. They've got similar noses. They're both kind of lanky and skinny, and the cleft chins. That's what really sells it for me, is the cleft chins. And his performance here is just...
I just love it. I love this whole interaction.
He delivers maybe probably my second favorite line of the entire movie.
There are a couple of really good ones.
There are a couple of great lines in the movie. But of course, they're coming to get you, Barbara.
I love her response. You're ignorant.
And his performance is one of my favorites in the movie as well. It's a shame that
he's about to die.
Yeah, this is it for Johnny until the very, very end of the movie when he comes back as a zombie. Spoilers.
As I understand, and maybe it's more like fan lore than reality, but is it true that people, when this stuff started to happen, like when this scene in particular happened in the movie, that people just kind of freaked out, and then as the movie went on, people were like leaving the theaters? And
see, I hadn't heard that.
Was it as dramatic as I've heard?
I don't know. That's something.
I've heard about people being so upset.
Right, the aggrandizing of an audience's reaction to a seminal or a landmark piece of film, or a piece of art for that matter, any kind of art for that matter, is something that is really common, and I think it's especially common in cinema because that concept goes all the way back to I think it was the Lumiere brothers, the train pulling into the station film, one of the early films.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that.
And the legend, as it were, is that the first audiences to see that little movie were running from the theater in terror and screaming because they thought the train was really barreling toward them and they were going to die horribly on the train tracks. But that's not really how it went down. There are eyewitness accounts that have been recorded that people just glaze over because the legend is more so interesting than reality.
I think it's also, nowadays, it's used as an advertising technique, definitely. I mean, remember all the Paranormal Activity, when the first Paranormal Activity stuff came out, and they didn't even have like actual trailers for the movie. It was just like shots of people reacting in the theater and like little like tolls at the bottom that were like how many people were taken away in ambulances because they had heart attacks or vomited or whatever.
And the very first Paranormal Activity movie was a viral campaign where they would show you, like local TV would show you or I guess local affiliates for your TV channels would show you the trailer, and the trailer consisted of very little, like you said, very little footage from the actual film and a lot of footage of audiences reacting to it. And then at the end it would say, do you want this movie to come to your town? Call this number, text this number. And that's how the movie got around. And they were like, yeah, I want to see that. I want to see what is making people freak out like that.
They were,
it was genius.
It was super genius advertising. And the fact that most of the advertising was just the people reacting so violently to it. They were just outraged and disgusted and just couldn't stand the horror. Like, I think maybe even back as maybe these rumors of this movie affecting people so badly, maybe that was even advertising way back then.
I mean, it's advertising that plays into, it's not exactly the same thing as the Streisand effect, but the Streisand effect, do you know what the Streisand effect is?
I don't.
The Streisand effect is this thing that got its name from Barbra Streisand years ago. I think, if I remember correctly, there was something about Barbra Streisand had some nude photos that this was years and years ago. Had some nude photos that someone threatened to leak to the public somehow, like through a magazine,
put on Reddit
or through
and right.
Oh yes, in the 70s Reddit. And she took care of it. Like, the word got out that the photos existed, but she, like, her legal team, I guess, took care of it and squashed it before it became a thing. But because of that, everyone was clamoring to see the photos. Everyone really wanted to see the photos. And it's not exactly the same thing, but I think that technique of advertising became really popular and is still really popular in that if you tell audiences that this is something that they shouldn't see, or it's something that they can't see, or they have to do something special in order to see it, then that makes them want to see it more.
That's like, who is it who... It's possible it's a misquote because I've seen it on like Facebook and stuff, so it's very likely a misquote. But maybe it was Philip Pullman or someone who said that the best way to get children to read a book is to say that it's a banned book. Yeah. Right? Like, I think, don't read this. It's so naughty.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken because I'm usually wrong, but I believe that is the Streisand effect. I think that's what that comes from. I think that's what it's called. But and this would be a really good example of that. I think in Reader's Digest, Reader's Digest published a portion, like an abridged version of Roger Ebert's review of this movie, which was really just kind of aghast and shocked, and he didn't understand what he just saw, and he talked about the children that he walked out of the theater with that obviously didn't understand what they just saw, and it really affected him, and he had no idea how much more it could have affected the children, all this kind of stuff. And Reader's Digest went on to editorialize a bit and say that they thought that watching this movie would incite like bouts of cannibalism.
There was our shot, right?
Our hint for this week was one of the quick shots where Barbara's walking through the house, and she sees the mounted heads, the deer's head and all that kind of stuff. That was one of our shots, which I think is probably borrowed, like the idea at least was probably borrowed by Sam Raimi years later when he made Evil Dead 2. With the deer's head coming to life and laughing on the wall. Yeah. Really psychotic scene.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, so. Right?
We've already learned.
It's a stretch.
We've learned some.
Taxidermy's creepy, man.
Taxidermy is creepy.
It is creepy.
We've already learned some things about the zombie, because I mean this is our first textbook of the modern zombie, I would say. And because before this, zombies were like voodoo zombies, right?
Yeah, they were more
like really racist, and
they were those movies were kind of racist because they all seem to have the same kind of pattern where, you know, some voodoo shaman would use zombie powder to turn some usually a black person into the classic version of a zombie, which was more like halfway between living and dead. It wasn't the dead coming back from the grave. It was more like the living being turned into something between.
And they were usually like controlled by somebody. They were
for the
slaves.
purpose of turning them into slaves.
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, and you know, especially the United States history with you know, black slavery. It's problematic to say the least. And
then I think that makes it so much more fantastic that this movie that
that this movie is what it is. Well, not only that, but then the next step in that pattern for those movies was that zombie that is made goes crazy and goes out of control, and then kidnaps some white woman somewhere.
Right.
And
Of course.
yeah, exactly. And then they have to go find the zombie and kill it. This movie, on the other hand, and perfect timing. We've got Dwayne Jones here
Here's
playing
Ben.
our protagonist Ben. Not only does this movie totally disregard that kind of shady and problematic past of zombie narrative, but it turns it on its head entirely.
Right. Totally flips it around.
Not even really intentionally either. George Romero swears to this day that that it wasn't his idea to cast a black actor in the lead. It just so happened that Dwayne Jones, who auditioned for the part, was just perfect for the part. And he did say that they thought they were being really progressive by doing that.
Which
but
to me says that they had some understanding of the statement they were making, but I think all good artists do.
They weren't ignorant of the zeitgeist. They weren't ignorant of the times that they were in, of course. But for them to cast a black actor without changing the role to be a quote unquote black role, it really makes this movie so as important as it is. And I would say that for all of the movies that came after this, the blaxploitation films and the grindhouse films that kind of espoused the angry nature of minority America at the time, and how that rise was so important to that culture and those people trying to attain equality, the civil rights movement and all that kind of stuff. I think that this movie is even more important than other films like In the Heat of the Night, where for maybe the first time in a major like Hollywood movie, a black man retaliates against a white man. A white man hits a black man, and he hits him right back. Sidney Poitier does that.
But what we get in this movie
1 year later, just 1 year later, ups the ante so ridiculously.
so much more.
It's just amazing. Like it's a great thing to watch.
We'll get to that scene soon.
We will. We'll mention it when it happens.
We've already hit a couple of the visual and some of the sound effects that I love in this movie too. I love that moment we just had with the blood, where it's dripping down the banister, I guess, from the dead person up on the landing.
Yeah.
And just the sound of the blood is just so. The sound effects in this movie are very minimalistic, but because of that, there's a very physical nature to them.
Visceral. It's
Visceral.
very
There
visceral.
we go.
Yeah.
And it makes them more realistic sounding.
Sure.
I
I think so. There's a scene later with a
the
fake
hand?
hand that's being chopped by a knife, and
And
it doesn't
it's
have.
very subtle.
It's not like real over the top Hollywood Foley. It's. I mean, we'll point it out when it gets there, but it is. It's very visceral, and even though the hand looks terrible, it's really.
Yeah.
It looks really terrible.
It's made out of, what did you say, clay or something?
It's made out of clay that's filled with chocolate syrup.
Oh, good.
Chocolate
Nice.
syrup is actually very important.
I had heard that my brother,
movie.
who is a huge horror movie fan,
specifically
zombie
movie
movie
fan,
fan, he had told me to look into that. So it is true. It was Hershey's syrup that.
I think it was Bosco brand, not
Okay.
Hershey's. It was Bosco brand syrup, and it's Bosco brand syrup is featured prominently in this movie throughout.
Because in black and white, the red doesn't show up well.
Shows up more like a gray, so they wanted something a bit darker and more viscous.
And syrup just runs so well.
It runs so perfectly well.
Just
I mean, that's
slow and gloppy. And
that's a technique that Alfred Hitchcock was using years before this in
Really?
Psycho. So the famous shower scene in
Yeah.
Psycho with the blood
is syrup.
that's chocolate syrup.
That's really great.
Yeah. So George Romero just lifted that technique. It is a great technique because it does look great in black and white.
So has Ben, I wasn't watching, has he killed his first zombies
He's
yet?
killed his first two. He's about to kill his third in a very, very brutal. Not to say that the first two weren't brutal.
Because they
He
were
beat
brutal. He bashes their heads in.
Yeah, he beats their skulls in with a tire iron. Now he's
this
going
one
to
is-
take the sharp side, the pointed side of the tire iron and stab this zombie in the head.
It is impressive when a film from 1968 can make you go, ugh.
Yep.
And it does.
absolutely does.
This movie has some moments that are
and I think that goes back to what I was
unsettling.
saying about how this movie does feel contemporary in a lot of ways. I think the one thing that really dates this movie for me is most of the music. And I think that was a budgetary
this stuff
thing
right here.
Yeah, this stuff, it's very bombastic, lots of horns and orchestra and strings and things like that.
It could be from whatever any movie of the time.
Right. But if you were to separate the music soundtrack from this and put in something a little bit more contemporary that's a little more atmospheric and ambient and just kind of an oral collage of sounds like so many horror movies use today to kind of build tension and keep things creepy, I think that this movie could stand toe to toe with any modern horror movie as far as tension building and atmosphere is concerned. It really is a masterpiece on a lot of levels.
When I went back to rewatch it, because I've seen this movie countless times in my life because of the fact that it's in the public domain, right? You explain to me again why that is.
So at the time that this was made, the law, the copyright law stated that any work that was created and intended to be under copyright had to bear the copyright mark, had to have a copyright
You're saying
statement.
Like the little circle with the C inside
Right.
it?
Had to have a copyright statement
that
on
mattered?
the work itself. Yes, that mattered. And they never did that.
They just didn't belong.
It just slipped their mind. They were like, oh, no, it's, of course it's copyrighted to us.
Wow.
Simple mistake, right? And because of that, it slipped into the public domain. So no one owns Night of the Living Dead. But the beauty of that, especially for our show, is that you can go watch it in its entirety right now on YouTube for free, totally legally. So if you don't have the means to have access to movies and things like that, and you want to try to sync up one of our episodes, this is probably the one to do it with because it's very, very.
Just go to YouTube.
And you can find this movie. Very simple.
Yeah, well, because it's.
That's also actually that is something else I wanted to mention because when we do the syncing bit in our intro, we always. We usually rather do it to one of the vanity cards that is attached to the beginning of movies, like production company vanity cards, because they should be attached to every single movie of that type because someone owns that movie, and the vanity card shows you who owns the movie. So we use those vanity cards to sync up, as a bookmark, basically, to sync up the movie to this podcast. But because no one owns this movie, all of the versions that are available on like DVD and VHS even and Blu-ray and HD DVD, I'm sure, all the different versions of this movie that exist, and there are a ton, every single one of them, I'm sure, is going to have a different vanity card for whatever company decided to just distribute this.
Oh, okay.
So instead of doing that, I thought it would be smarter if we just used the first title card in the movie proper, which says an Image 10 production. So if you got confused about that, I'm sorry, but for a movie of this type, a movie in the public domain, that was really the best way to do it.
Because it's in the public domain, I've seen this movie in passing so many times that it's just, for me, it's like a prop. It is a living prop. When you go to a haunted house or something, then usually you're in the waiting line or something, they have it playing. Yeah. They'll have it on
little TVs and monitors
set
and
up
stuff.
around. I mean, maybe even in the haunted house itself, it'll be on some
in one
TV
of the
in a
sets
creepy set
sure.
somewhere, right? Like it's on TV during October constantly. I've seen it so many times that it's just background for Halloween for me. However, when I sat down to watch it this past week, the couple times I've watched it, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit lamer than I found it to be.
Really? Okay.
Well, I not by lamer I mean
how long has it been since you've sat down and watched it?
I don't know if I have ever sat down and just said tonight I'm going to watch the original 68.
Okay.
It has been on countless times in my house, and I have been in the room for the whole thing many, many times. Yeah. But this past week may have been the first time that I sat there and really paid attention to it. And I kind of expected it was going to be a little boring, or it was maybe not going to be as graphic as I wanted. That there were going to be moments where I was going to be like, "Oh, please, you should have."
You thought it was going to feel dated,
like it was going to cut away when he stabbed him in the head or something. But no, they show us.
Yep.
They show us the gore, and that's what struck me as feeling like this movie is absolutely not dated. It is.
There are some key ways in which this movie feels very contemporary. One of which is that it doesn't shy away from the gore.
Yeah.
It is one of the first movies that actually has gore in it. They use, later on we see real cow's intestines and real cow livers when the zombies are feasting. Some of the other gore is just like roasted chicken with, like I said, chocolate sauce, Bosco's chocolate sauce on top.
But the actors really are putting those intestines and stuff in their mouth.
They sure are. They are
that
dedicated.
That is super dedication for a movie that probably they were hardly being paid anything for.
But what's going on right now on the screen with Ben boarding up these doors, it's cutting back and forth between, your standard kind of tripod shots and then handheld shots. There are handheld shots that kind of have a lot more movement and build tension in a more, I keep saying contemporary, but it really is, build tension in a more contemporary way, because that's really what handheld does. In fact, so much so that found footage horror films are now their own genre.
Yes, they are.
Basically based on the concept that handheld footage is more intense and builds tension better than other types of footage. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that's the case. I think that a healthy balance of both, everything in moderation, as they say,
yes.
Is the way to go with that. But I think this is one of the first films to use handheld footage and to allow their shots, not only to use handheld footage, but to allow their shots to go in and out of focus. So when the shots are handheld, their subjects will be moving in and out of the focal area. Mm-hmm. And it creates kind of a sense of disorientation for the audience, which is something that horror movies weren't doing at this time. This is really the first.
Which is such a great technique.
I say first, but I say first knowing full well that I will get actually'd on the internet. But for the sake of argument, this is among the very first to do that, and certainly the most important film that uses these techniques. And I think that's what allows it to stay relevant visually and artistically. It's really remarkable.
Well, I mean, this is, to me, like, if you go back in literature and you look at modern fantasy novels, of course there were fantasy novels before Lord of the Rings. Of course those existed. But today, for modern fantasy, we kind of go back and we look at Lord of the Rings as our textbook, as the first one that made fantasy what it is today.
Sure reads like one.
And this movie to me is kind of the textbook for zombie movies. It is what made the genre, the subgenre of zombie movies, what it is today. And gosh, today, zombie movies are so big now. Not just movies, but just zombies are huge.
They are. And for those people who are very familiar with zombie films and then go back and watch this, the genre is really in its infancy here, of course, this being really the first of this type of, can you say Romerian?
Romerian?
How do you Ianize Romero?
Romeroan? I mean, that's a Romerin? No, Romerian.
Romeroan zombies. I'm just going to throw it out there. Come with a set of rules. And people who know those rules well, know the modern rules really well, and come back to this, will notice some key differences in how zombies operate in this film than they do in new films. I think the biggest difference between zombies in a variety of modern zombie films is whether or not they're slow zombies or fast zombies. That's the biggest discrepancy.
Are they runners or not?
Right.
I hate running zombies.
They're terrible, aren't they?
They are so terrible.
I prefer the shuffling ones because it makes me feel like I've got a chance. Because I'm a fat guy, I can't run away from that. But in this movie, they are slow moving.
But they use tools though,
that's one of the key differences.
A major deal, and not just
the first zombie that we see, played by what's his name, Bill Stinsman, I think. I think that's his name. He died a couple of years ago.
The guy who is the They are coming to get you, Barbara.
Yes,
zombie.
yes.
And he comes to get her.
He picks up a rock and smashes the window.
And he tries the door handle on the car, too.
Almost braining Romero, who was handling the camera in the process.
dear.
Just barely missed him, apparently. And he tries the door handle. Later in the movie, zombies pick up Ben's old torches and use them to beat down the door. Picked up rocks and smashed the headlights on his truck.
The daughter, Karen, we haven't met her parents or her yet, but when we meet the daughter, Karen, at the end, she kills her mom with a trowel. She doesn't eat her mom. She doesn't bite her. She just picks up a trowel and stabs her to death.
And it's interesting because I think Romero himself, in his universe, in this series of Dead films, of which there are 6 official Night of the Living Dead films, there is a progression of the zombie. There is a progression of the living dead and how they do learn over time, or they have the capacity to learn. In Dawn of the Dead, it's as simple as they are remembering in some way, in some subconscious way, they are remembering what they used to do, so they all kind of congregate at the mall. And he uses that as a statement on consumerism.
Consumerism, yeah.
It's a very loose statement, but that's what makes Dawn of the Dead.
This is what we do,
exactly.
is we go buy shit.
That's what makes it special subtextually for that movie, and that's what people talk about in that film. In Day of the Dead, you have the character of Bub, the zombie, who is learning.
The zombie.
You have problems with Bub.
I don't have problems.
I just don't understand
I
them.
just think he's silly.
Bub is everything. Where Bub is learning how to do the things that he did in life. Learns how to shave. He learns how to enjoy music again. He picks up the receiver of a phone. He picks up a book and opens it like he's pretending to read. And then the progression moves further in the 4th film, Land of the Dead, where I think the main zombie's name is Big Daddy or something like that.
Is that the one where they're like trapped in the city? There's a tower or something?
Yeah, there's a tower. They're not trapped in the city, but their city is
barricaded
walled off.
into
They're
the
barricaded
city.
into
Yeah,
the city.
and there's like
and
a
there's
tower in the center.
tower and
where the rich people live or something?
Right, and that, of course, that movie is about
okay.
classism.
Yeah, I get it now.
Yeah, classism and capitalism.
Took
and all
like
that
1
kind of
second.
stuff. Exactly. And
tower where the rich people. Okay.
and then, of course, that movie has Dennis Hopper in it, using the word zombie for maybe the first and only time in one of these Romero zombie movies, which totally just. Really? That's a rule, right?
Well,
you don't say zombie in a zombie movie?
Of course you don't, but if you make a rule, then the point is to break the rule, even if you're the one who made the rule.
There's got to be a good reason, though, right?
Why you don't say zombie?
No, there's got to be a reason why you break the rule. If there's a rule, rules are meant to be broken.
What do we call them in World War Z? Not the stupid movie in the book, Zeds or something like that?
There's several names, but they do call them zombies sometimes.
Which I think is totally appropriate. So I think the rule of not saying zombie in a zombie thing is whatever. Anyways, so after Land.
Well, what I was saying was basically in Romero's world, in this universe, there is a progression to the zombies. There's a progression to how they learn and their capability of learning, their capacity for learning. And did we just miss something?
We did.
We missed something important. We'll come back to it. But in this movie, they're already pretty advanced. Like they're more advanced than they are even, 2 films in.
Yeah.
So yeah, what we just missed
is one of the most important scenes in the whole movie, I think.
It is, and I already brought it up, but a year before this came out, there was actually directed by, I believe the filmmaker was Stanley Kramer, a film called In the Heat of the Night, starring Sidney Poitier. And in that movie, there's a scene where he is investigating something, and he's questioning a rich white man, and the rich white man takes offense to him wanting to question him for something or thinking that he is suspect in some way, so he slaps Sidney Poitier, and Poitier slaps him back. Because
and everyone went, what?
Yeah, because Poitier sees himself as that man's equal, or better. And that was an important moment for a country that was dealing with something as heavy as race relations and the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And in this movie, we just saw the character of Barbara become hysterical, want to go out and find her brother, but Ben knows that it's not safe. He refuses to let her. She slaps him, and he punches her in the face. So where
Yes,
Sidney
he
Poitier just backhanded a white man just a year prior, Dwayne Jones straight up punches a white woman in the face.
Oh, yes, he does.
Not only that, but and we'll get to it when it gets there. But later in the movie, there's a whole scene where another man betrays him, and I mean, Dwayne Jones is the only person of color in this entire film. So when we talk about anyone else, it's a white person,
Right.
So there's another man in the house who kind of betrays him in a moment of tension, and Dwayne Jones's character Ben takes offense to it and beats the shit out of the guy.
Yep.
Just beats, like there's a whole sequence where he's just kicking his ass all through the house. It's glorious.
It is. And then at the end of the film, when Harry
Harry
tries
Cooper,
to,
yes, that same character.
tries to get his power back by taking Ben's gun,
Yes.
Ben takes the gun back and kills him.
Yep.
So it is. I can't believe
Talk
that
about
Romero
upping the ante. Yeah.
didn't know what he was doing. He definitely knew
He had
what he was
to
doing.
have known.
But we've often talked about.
But it's cooler to play coy, right?
Yes, it is cooler to play coy. We've often talked about, though, the fact that I'm not calling him out and saying that he's been lying and that he planned it to be this huge movie about race and also there's a lot of stuff in here that I'll talk about later about the Vietnam War that has some pretty convincing commentary floating around the internet about it, and not just the internet and historical.
This was a heavy time.
Anthologies and stuff, too.
I mean, one of my favorite ways to look at history and to look at people is through art, and especially I'm really cinema is my favorite way to do that, because as a person who appreciates cinema and a person who studies film, I feel like in some way I'm really studying everything. Because in order to study film, you have to study history. You have to study psychology. You have to study
Literature.
sociology. You have to study literature. You have to study music. You have to study visual art. You have to study performance art. You have to study all of these individual things in order to understand the big picture. So a lover of a film, a film academic, is an academic of all things, truly, in that sense. And that's, I guess that's my favorite lens. That's my favorite medium through which to view all of those things.
I do love. Of course, I love film. I'm on a podcast about movies,
Yeah,
but
of course.
Of course, I love film. But for me, I always go back to the fact that reading something, the long version of a story is much more effective to me than the glimpse that we get in a movie or the series of glimpses we get in a television show or something like that. I love the personal connection that I can get where I feel like I'm inside a place or inside a person when I read a book. And for movies, I'm watching something through a screen, through someone else's point of view or someone else's eyes, and I get so much more distance than I get in literature, and that's why I love literature so much more. Also because it's what I've studied and what I work in. So, but with this, I mean, with film too, there's so much we can say when we look back at it historically, and whatever was going on at the time. Often I think that the artist, the creator, doesn't know specifically how a good artist has to have a balance, I think. If you sit there and you go, well, I'm going to say something about race and I'm going to make a movie about race and race issues, and then you set out to make a movie like that and you plot it out and you make the little points, it comes across lofty and pretentious.
Oh, you run the risk of sounding heavy-handed and
Right.
didactic. Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you just are like, I'm just gonna make a zombie movie, and you just make a zombie movie and you really don't care about anything else, then it's probably gonna be a pile of shit. However, if you find some medium where you're a good artist and you have these ideas, maybe subconsciously, maybe a little consciously, but you don't throw it at the thing.
Well, instead of trying to make a progressive piece of art, make a piece of art and make progressive choices about it.
That's a good way to put it.
And I know that that sounds kind of fluffy and philosophical, but I think that if you approach it with that head on your shoulders, then you're probably approaching it from a safer place. You're approaching it from a place that has less risk of sounding didactic and preachy. And I think that's exactly what happened here because, I say that the character of Ben was not written for a black man, and they did not change the character of Ben when a black man was cast. They simply cast the actor who was best for the role. But that is, I do have to say that they did change the character in other important ways. Originally, Ben was kind of a good old boy. He was a truck driver. He was maybe not so smart.
Interesting.
And he was kind of
that is absolutely not this character.
Right. He was can you say Luddite? I guess Luddite being the opposite of erudite. But when they cast Ben, or they cast Dwayne Jones as Ben, Dwayne Jones is an academic.
Yeah.
He's a studied actor.
He doesn't even know how to work the truck.
He's Yeah, exactly. He's an activist. He's a pacifist.
He doesn't know how to fill it up with gas.
Romero talked about how Jones was uncomfortable doing all of the violent things in the movie because he is a pacifist and he's an idealist and he's an academic. He's intelligent. So when they cast him, because of the intelligence that he exudes just in his natural character, they changed the character to match Dwayne Jones. Not because he's a black man, but because he's a smart man, which is a very smart thing to do. Also in the original script, Barbara was the only one who was supposed to survive.
Really?
She was supposed to survive the entire ordeal, and Ben's character was supposed to become one of the living dead. But when they cast Dwayne Jones, they realized that they had cast the greatest actor in their film, the best actor in their film.
There's no reason to kill him off.
And there's no reason to kill him off. There's no reason not to make him the protagonist, the main character. So that's exactly what they did. They bumped his part
that is
up.
interesting too, because we do start the movie getting the feeling that she's the protagonist, and up until the point when he arrives, that is how we feel, and then he knocks her out, which I do have my
She was
issues
supposed to be a stronger character. In fact, in the 1990 remake of the movie by Tom Savini, I believe that she does survive. That she is a stronger character and she does survive the ordeal. And they keep the original idea for Ben, and he does die and become a zombie.
I will say that my.
If you just look at like screen caps from the 1990 remake, Barbara's got a very
I don't know if I've ever
Ellen
seen
Ripley
remake
thing going on. She's got very, very short hair, and there's the tank top, and she's holding a shotgun and stuff like that.
Well, and that, I mean, to me, that is the horror female protagonist that I love. That, I mean, it's the horror female character. It's the any female character I love. But like Alien, right? I mean, it's a perfect example. She the whole time we're never sitting there thinking she's a scream queen or something. She's
not at all.
She is taking care of business. She's I
Then
love.
Can you imagine how shocking it was for people to go to the movie theaters like 3 or 4 years later and see her playing the damsel in distress in Ghostbusters?
Oh, that's right.
Because, in a supernatural pseudoscience, because Ghostbusters is kind of science fiction. They use machines, to deal with the kind of fantastical problem. But Sigourney Weaver, I mean, people go to see Alien and they're like, she can take care of herself. And then they watch Bill Murray save her. They're like, please, she can kill Bill Murray.
Excuse me. It was kind of like when
kill him with a look.
When I saw, and that's this is like definitely not as good of a comparison, but like when I saw Sarah Michelle Gellar in The Grudge, the American Grudge remake.
Oh yeah,
right, and like she's getting dragged around by the ghost and she's crying and screaming. I'm like, Buffy, what the hell are you doing? Just get up and kick it in the face.
I watched this girl kick supernatural, like demon, ghosty, vampire-y, monster-y ass.
So many, like
for
she should
7
be making
years.
smarmy comments at it, and using household objects to beat it with.
But that's how actors get typecast.
Yes,
is
true.
With that kind of thinking. So,
so that's fine. But anyways, though, that is my one. If I am to say I have issue with this movie, and I don't really have issue with it. I mean, the fact is that you can't ask every movie or every book or every whatever to cover every single political and social base that needs to be covered. I don't want everything to be PC because I just don't. I don't expect that to be the case.
It's too much fun to ruffle feathers, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not. It's not that I expect this movie to do everything for me, whereas it's doing some great things. It's making incredibly important statements about race and about I think some Vietnam War stuff, some veteran stuff, PTSD, things like that.
It's about
media
yeah.
and
there is an awareness to the film.
Right. It does some great things. However, I feel that in a very similar historical context, the women in this movie kind of get overlooked.
A little bit.
And I think the only character that I really like at all, that I really have any respect for, is Helen.
Mm-hmm.
I like her, but in the end, she doesn't really do anything either.
Yeah, not much.
Barbara,
she gets her moment of redemption.
Barbara gets her moment. Yeah. Before she dies, the way she dies is trying to save Helen. She sort of sacrifices herself and tries to stop the zombies from coming in. But we look at her right now, and she's just catatonic, right? Yeah. She's the whole movie. She's just, oh my God. I mean, she faints.
Unresponsive,
granted, she was
and when
punched
she talks,
in the face.
she talks to the middle space and doesn't really look at anyone, and kind of becomes hysterical very easily when she talks about these things.
And that is really disappointing for me. However, I feel like it's a pretty valid parallel to the same historical social issues that were taking place. The feminist movement was getting the ball rolling before the civil rights, like, race movement happened. Yeah. They were already...
But it didn't really catch fire until the 70s.
Until after the race movement. Yeah. Because there's a reason. Because the women and stuff, a lot of the key figures were having meetings already.
This is the scene we were talking about earlier where he chops the clay hand.
Of the clay hand.
And the Foley used there is just like a
chunk.
Yep. Very, very visceral.
Wonderful. The important key female figures in the feminist movement, they were already having summits and stuff. Like, they were already meeting. But then these massive movements for race equality came up, and surprise, surprise, the women just kind of were like, well, we're going to support this, and we're gonna back this up and put our own things on the back burner.
Put our own resources in. Oh, right. Put our own issues on
our own needs and desires and
back burner, and then, I guess, pool our resources toward this
thing
goal.
That we also think is important and should be fixed.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And I feel like it's kind of what happens in this movie too, is that because we're dealing with this race issue, that the female issue, in my viewing of this from, a later
Some
date.
Shocking nudity.
Yes, this was on the cover, and it makes me think that it gives that exploitation film about it.
Very much so. I mean, this movie was billed as an exploitation movie when it was released. Not that I think that's inappropriate. I think that it's very much kind of in its own way, it's a blaxploitation film. It's about Black power.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe it wasn't intentional, but that's the great thing about art, is that art is something that someone makes that other people have a reaction to, and by and large, people have reacted to this movie in a way that says, they empathize with the character of Ben and what he is attempting to do, and they kind of conflate it with the events of the time period. And if you look at it through that lens, then I think that it belongs right up there with, Superfly and Dolomite and all of those great, strong black figures of 1960s, 1970s. I mean, this was a really early one. Like, the exploitation scene had not really exploded yet.
Yeah.
So I would say that this is an early one, and I think it belongs right next to all those other ones. It's pretty great.
But I mean, you understand.
But this actually has more of an artistic.
Yes, I would say that
slant to it. I think it's got
it's a little
artistic,
it's a little
more
higher brow.
Artistic aspirations, higher brow. It's a little bit higher brow than Dolomite.
You understand what I'm saying though, with feeling like the women in this movie are kind of just set to the side.
Yeah.
they don't really do anything. I mean, we've got Barbara, who's
You know what this movie needs? It needs a Foxy Brown.
does
It
it,
needs a Pam Grier. That's what it needs.
and then we've got this girl. What's her name? Judy, who is
Bless her heart,
dumb?
she's so dumb.
Like her dress gets caught and they wind up exploding in a truck.
That's the delivery.
And, yeah, her jacket. And then Helen, I think Helen's okay, but
Helen doesn't put up with any
no,
shit
she
from
does
Harry.
not. She does not put up with
in
anything.
fact,
but she doesn't do anything
I
either.
wanted to ask you about something because we've already seen Ben smoke one cigarette, and then Harry has now gone into the cellar. He's going to go downstairs, and he's pissed because nobody's listening to him, and no one will go into the cellar with him. He pulls out his pack of cigarettes. He has no cigarettes,
And it's empty.
He crumples it up and he throws it on the ground.
This nice little moment where we just saw Ben smoking.
Oh,
it's
and here's
like,
another one. Here's Ben smoking another cigarette. So the first time Ben smokes a cigarette, he's just finished boarding up a room. So he's taken control of the situation. He's boarded up a room. He sits down and he takes a break and he smokes a cigarette. He wins in a fight against Harry, this character Harry, and he says, my favorite line in the movie, you can be the boss down there, I'm boss up here. Fucking amazing. And
it comes after that other great one where he's like, is this your house?
is this your house? And then he goes, Harry loses the fight to Ben, goes into the cellar, and Ben smokes a cigarette, and then we immediately see Harry come down here, and he's run out of cigarettes even though he wants to smoke, so he crumples his pack up, he throws it away. He has to reach into his wife Helen's purse,
Yep.
which he's doing now, to take one of her cigarettes. Then we see this exchange between the two of them where it's very clear that although Harry is the much more emotional, angry person, Helen is the one who's in control in their relationship.
Yeah.
Then later, when Helen goes upstairs, she smokes a cigarette and starts to talk to Barbara a little bit, and Harry walks by and he asks for a cigarette from Helen again. And I think that the movie is reinforcing the cigarette as a symbol for
Of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what
so.
it is.
He's borrowing it from his wife. He's pretending like it's his.
He's taking a little bit of control.
A little bit of control, which she's the one in possession of. She is the one in possession of the control, and
Right.
he's taking a little bit from her.
Yes.
To make it, to put on the
airs,
pretense
right?
that
Yeah,
he
exactly.
is in control.
It is all pretense. It is all pretense with this character, and I think it's really important to show how impotent he really is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not. I mean, he's not a particularly smart character. He thinks and he has motivations, and I think that he does have a good argument for why
staying in the cellar.
For staying in the cellar. That's another thing that I really love is when they argue, he has his point of view about why the cellar is the safest place. There's only one way in, one way out. They only have one place that they have to protect. Whereas on the top floor, there are more ways to get out, but then there are more ways for the zombies to get in. But at the same time, if the upstairs gets overtaken, there's always the cellar to fall back to. And that's Ben's point of view. So although they both have excellent arguments, you end up having to side with Ben, which everyone does. And then once Helen discovers that there's a radio upstairs, she gets pissed at her husband for making such a dumb decision.
Well, I think it's also.
So this shot right here, take a look at this. Did you see that?
that cut?
Yes, there was a hard cut there because originally there was 8 minutes more of a conversation.
Oh my!
And I guess the producer, the person distributing it, decided the movie was already too long, so they just cut it there. It's the one thing in the movie that feels really amateurish to me.
Yeah.
Because I think everything else, low budget aside,
but it looks good though.
I agree. I think that
I think the framing and stuff is good.
Yeah.
I think the pacing of the movie is good. The writing is good in this movie.
I think the photography is really good. And again, I think some of the things that at the time could have been seen as amateurish, like the handheld camera work and the subjects going in and out of focus, are things that now we can look back on from a contemporary perspective.
They have meaning.
They do. They have meaning now, and they're techniques that are used today, which is keeping this movie, at least for the time being, timeless. And I think that's really important. So that one little hiccup aside, I do think this movie does stand toe to toe with the greats.
This so here we've got only the women looking after the child, of course, and we have to have a woman with the child at all times. We can't just leave a man alone with the child. There's an interesting moment later though where Harry is saying something about, what am I going to do? Am I going to carry her if we run from the house? And Ben's like, you know what? I'll carry her.
Yeah, I'll
I
do
can
it.
carry her. That's fine. I'll carry her. And so I kind of have to take back that little poke right there because Ben makes it known that he would be a capable man to take care of a child.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just that Harry isn't.
Harry's just not really capable at anything.
Of anything.
He gets the gun and he loses it a second later because Ben's like, no, sir.
No way.
No, you son of a bitch.
No, it's my gun. The other thing that I kind of have to retract on a little bit is my I mean, I don't have to, but my criticisms of Barbara being so utterly useless in this movie that she would just have died. She would have just sat down and died inside this farmhouse if Ben hadn't come along. When he's boarding things up, she's just standing there, just looking useless. Mm-hmm. And then winds up sleeping on the couch after she's been knocked out by him, which is,
Yeah.
you know.
It is a thing.
It is a thing. And again, I guess we aren't going to talk about all the issues like female abuse and things like that. That's fine.
Domestic abuse.
Let's just deal with the one that we're dealing with and give the movie a pass, I guess, for
I was thinking about this on one of my rewatches.
not being able to do everything.
And that kind of leads into what I'm just thinking about. I was thinking about this on one of my rewatches. Do you think that the movie has anything significant to say about the perception of interracial relationships at the time? Because before these other characters show up, before Harry and Tom and Judy and, Helen and Karen, who's still in the cellar.
It's just him and her.
It's just him and her in the house, and they're being, encroached upon on all sides by this malevolent and notably 100% white force in The Living Dead on the outside.
I think that is an interesting comment. However, I don't know how it fits into the fact that he then punches her in the face.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
if you think about it
if we're
from
tearing
those
it down
terms,
like that,
it's
then,
a little troubling.
Yeah, then that's not. I feel like this movie would want to say positive things about interracial relationships.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And so if we are using them as like a microcosm of interracial relationships, then him punching her in the face really doesn't say something positive.
It creates problems.
Yeah.
In that,
However,
in that
the
theory.
part about the white zombies coming and encroaching in on the interracial couple, I mean, that's a nice little idea.
Again, Ben is the only person of color in the
but
entire
again, punching
movie.
her in the face. So
Right. So let's just ignore that.
yeah. Like I said, I feel like if I try to get too deep into the feminist stuff in this movie, then I'm just going to be disappointed. So I'm just going to give it a pass for saying that it can't do everything. And that what it does is important in its own right. And women took the back burner. So, however, though, my comments about Barbara, I feel like after doing some research, I do view her character in a slightly different way. Let's forget she's female. Let's just take it out of the equation. And then we can look at it from the idea that she has seen some traumatic things, much like the veterans that are returning from the Vietnam War at this time, or that are still out there in it, the soldiers, and are coming back with PTSD.
I believe the phrase is "in the shit." Out there in the shit.
Out there in the shit. Mm-hmm. And they're coming back with PTSD, and no one is recognizing it as a real thing.
Right.
So here we have a character who has seen some traumatic stuff, some really graphic stuff, and now she's incapable of doing anything because she's messed up. She's shell-shocked.
And on top of that, she doesn't, much like the people suffering from PTSD coming back from Vietnam, she doesn't have an appropriate support system.
Yes, there is not an appropriate support system. All she gets is someone who punches her in the face. So, who does take care of her and keeps her from dying, but punches her in the face and tells her that she is being useless, which she is. But if we're looking at it from the through the lens of a criticism about veteran neglect or something like that, then I kind of look at her character and go, oh, okay, well, let's take out the gender equation, and then actually this is a character that is doing something that is important.
Is valuable on a subtextual level.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And I like looking at it that way, because then I don't feel so upset about some of the other things that.
Right, about the implications from a feminist perspective that it has to say.
Okay,
although
so
I don't think women are patently mistreated.
yes, I
in
don't
the
think
movie.
so. Again, Helen is great. She's great, but she doesn't do anything. When her husband takes the gun away from Ben, she just watches in terror. She has good ideas, and she clearly is the one in control in their relationship.
There's a strength of character that she at least vocalizes.
Right, but she doesn't take action.
Right. No agency.
Yeah. And then again, Judy is just dumb. So
Poor Judy.
My jacket's stuck. My jacket.
and like the scene that kills me is the one where they're sitting upstairs and Tom's talking about how he's going to go out and he's going to help Ben get the truck started, and she's just like smiling dumbly, and he's like, why are you smiling at me? Why are you giving that smile? And she's just like, because and I don't know what she says. It doesn't matter. It's just dumb.
Okay, so let's talk about the movie itself. Let's back away from subtext for like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Because I'm going to go right back into it.
Yeah, me too.
But the cause of the living dead coming back to life is theorized, although it's never said for sure. It's theorized in this scene right here on the television when the reporters are talking to, I guess,
government and military
officials and things, that it is possible that the living dead are returning to life due to radiation, cosmic radiation that was brought back from a satellite that was visiting Venus, that the United States destroyed when they discovered how much radiation that it was carrying, but the radiation made its way back to the Earth anyway. And it is causing the dead to come back to life.
The radiation, I think they say specifically the radiation is affecting the brains, and that's why you have to...
Exactly. That's why you have to destroy the brain.
And it affects all people on Earth. So
that's right. So much like spoilers for The Walking Dead, if you haven't read or seen The Walking Dead, much like The Walking Dead, where we learn, some ways into that story that people aren't coming back because they are being bitten by zombies.
It's not an infection.
It's not an infection.
This is an
no, it is an infection, but it's airborne and everybody already has it. So no matter how you die, you come back.
But it's not right. It's not an infection, and it's not like an infectious disease that the only way to spread it is by being bitten by somebody,
exactly,
or like in the what's a good universe, the 28 Days. Later, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that one where you have to
body
because
fluids.
They even have the scene where like blood drips into the guy's eye,
and
he turns that way. So it's not that world. It's a world where it's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is a radiation story.
It is, and for people who are more familiar with modern zombie movies and zombie fiction,
it's usually a biological.
Yeah, it's a biological thing, or it's like a virus or something like that.
Resident Evil is a
corporation that has developed
a
T virus, all that kind of junk or whatever. But I think that Romero himself even abandons this idea. The second movie into this series, in Dawn of the Dead, where the tagline itself is, "When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." And that's, of course, a more fantastical, supernatural,
spiritual, even religious,
kind of spiritual
even.
And religious kind of thing. That that if you, you have to accept that there is a hell,
that it's physical enough that there's a limit, a quantity that
that there is physically a hell somewhere, and that it can fill up.
Right.
Like you have to buy those things. I do think that tagline is badass enough that I can forgive any hocus pocus surrounding that, because I love that. When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
In the remake of this movie, is it this? No, it's the remake of Dawn.
Yes.
Right? In the remake
of
Dawn, I really got the feeling that it was more of like a religious, spiritual, supernatural kind of thing.
They don't
talk about radiation and stuff in that one.
No, they don't. It's been a while since I've seen Zack Snyder's remake, but I really like that movie.
I do too, actually.
Really like it.
You've said before that you feel like you'll
I'm
get
sure
some
I will incur
backlash
some
for-
backlash or something, because Zack Snyder is from cinephiles and people who appreciate film, they don't really take to Zack Snyder's movies, and I don't really either. I don't like much of what he's done.
What else has he done?
Most recently, Man of Steel.
Oh.
He did Sucker
dear.
Punch, which is just I don't even know what to say about that movie. It is a problem. It is a feminist problem from top to bottom.
Yeah.
What else has he done? Watchmen. I liked Watchmen. Okay,
yeah.
Watchmen was fine.
Yeah. It's okay.
But yeah, he did 300, which was
I
good.
like 300. That's fine.
Yeah, like most of his, I would say the majority of his movies, I'm like, yeah, okay, sure,
okay,
that's fine.
yeah.
I really
like
his-
the
I
Dawn
really like his
remake
Dawn
a
of the
lot.
Dead.
I need to rewatch it actually
It's a
because
lot
it's
of
been a
fun.
few years. I think I only saw it just the one time we saw it in theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and it is true. It's a fact that I cannot lie about. That I, as much as I love horror, and as I've loved horror as long as I can remember. Even when I was a kid, I enjoyed some horror movies from time to time. However, Chucky and Gremlins terrified me. But I didn't always like zombies. Zombies kind of upset me a lot, even when we were first dating.
Well, I took you to see Dawn of the Dead.
Was it the Dawn
Yeah,
remake
we did the
that
Dawn
really
remake.
bothered me in the end? And I may not have seen it since then. My memory of it is that it looked really good and it was really creepy, but the ending disturbed me. It upset me. However, I've grown up. It's been like 10 years or something since that, and I'm much more cynical maybe now. Maybe I'm more jaded.
Well,
but
I think this is certainly the most cynical of all of the major horror subgenres.
yeah, I love zombies now. I'm a huge fan of them now.
Zombies are not about hope. It's not about hope.
No, but the other things that zombies are about are things that I love to watch and read. So, I mean, one of my favorite books of recent reading is World War Z. I love that book so much. The movie is really sad.
Yeah. But I mean,
but-
zombie films are characteristically bleak. Like they're
They
supposed
are.
to be.
And when I said the movie was sad, I don't mean it's bleak. I mean it was utterly disappointing.
It's a sad piece of art. That it's sad that it,
was-
exists.
It was
the way
so
it is,
disappointing because that was such a great book.
Yeah.
But I love zombies now, and I kind of love it also because right now the post-apocalyptic thing is so popular. Everybody's doing it. They're doing it in YA. They're doing it all over the board, and zombies are a great way to do that. We've got a bunch of TV shows that are going on with zombies. We've got, I mean, The Last of Us. We've got major video games that are coming out that are just spectacular.
It's taken seriously.
It's
taken very
zombies
seriously.
are serious business now.
Yeah. Well, I think that they have. I think their roots.
Here, by the way, here's the dumb scene where like she was smiling at him, and,
right.
and he was like,
We're talking about Judy and
Yes.
Tom here. Yeah.
Dear,
Well,
poor Judy.
I think that zombie fiction has afforded its, I guess, the respect that it's given because of its start. And if you consider this to be its start, this is a serious film. It's a serious take on a serious subject, and whether or not the filmmakers really intended for it to say the things that it says with the width and the depth that it does say them. There's a lot to this movie. There's a lot to read into this movie. There's a lot to be said about this movie, and it demands to be taken seriously. And I think that's an excellent start for.
But it's still so fun, and that's why zombie movies are great. Is because we are discussing really serious topics, and I mean, it doesn't get much more serious than neglect of veterans and
Exactly.
stuff like that, right?
Well, I had initially brought up the whole radiation angle as, you know, being the cause of the living dead coming back, or the dead coming back and becoming living dead rather, because I think that there is yet more subtext. There is further allusions to the space race,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
leads us into the Cold War, which leads us into McCarthy era, you know, Red Scare, communist kind of stuff that was going on in the United States, where anybody could be a communist. Anybody could be a villain. Your neighbor could be a villain. Your minister could be a villain.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Exactly. It's the other.
Right.
It's the thing that you don't understand that everyone tells you. You've got to be scared of this because it's frightening. It's scary. They don't believe the way that we believe.
At
They are
this
different.
point already, was Hollywood getting bashed with it? Were the Hollywood people already getting blacklisted, or
it started in
it
had been happening before that. Yeah, blacklisted. Yeah, exactly. It had been happening since the 50s. And I think that there are remnants of that in just that little throwaway line, in just that little moment on the television where they mentioned that it could be this satellite that's gone to space and it's bringing back radiation. Radiation of all things, we're talking about what was this, 68? So this was just 23 years after the end of World War II.
Yeah.
So ideas of nuclear war.
Yeah.
You've got the Cold War. You've got the arms race with Russia. You've got the Red Scare. You've got all this kind of stuff. I think that all of that informs this movie in an interesting way. And say what you will about, zombies coming back because of radiation from space.
I do think
again, from space, bringing up space, I think that this movie being the kind of movie that it is and being as kind of new and fresh and unlike anything anybody had ever seen. If there is a model that this movie copies, I think it is.
That's
right.
What I was going to go for is the alien invasion thing.
This is basically an alien invasion movie, and somewhat appropriately, a lot of the music used in the movie, it was actually from a previous movie called Teenagers from Outer Space.
For real.
Yeah, which is an alien invasion
movie. It totally
movie.
makes sense, though. I mean, the way this movie is shot, sometimes it feels like an old alien movie. It doesn't feel like a monster movie.
No.
And well, and again, if we're talking subtextually, right? Alien invasion. I mean, again, being invaded by
foreign
aliens,
right? Something
foreigners,
that you don't understand,
right?
Right.
So
Red Scare, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does. It all fits, and I think the radiation theme goes well into that because it does. However, though, we haven't talked about the stuff that I feel is really prominent in this movie is the stuff with the media and Vietnam. Specifically, we've gotten a lot of news broadcasts already. I love the story behind the news broadcasts because
we haven't seen the militia yet, have we?
Has he talked to them yet? I'm not sure if the reporters talked to them yet.
I don't think they have.
But we've already been getting over the radio and then also on the television. We've been getting these great news broadcasts. Now, media in Vietnam. First, we've got to set the stage here. Before the 60s, there wasn't much correspondence going on with Vietnam. Before 63, there were only like 8 correspondents that were in South Vietnam. By 64, there were like 40. I read there were 60 somewhere else, so then my numbers are very likely off. But by December of 1966, there were more than 400 news correspondents from around the world in South Vietnam. And I was reading some quotes from this political scientist, Daniel Halen, who he was saying that Americans started getting all of their info on Vietnam through the living room war. This media, every night the Americans were getting these newsreels in their living rooms. Mm-hmm. And what Daniel Halen said about it is he said, the forces of good were locked in battle once again with the forces of evil. What began to change in 1967 was the conviction that the forces of good would inevitably prevail. This movie was 68. And what is our theme? That maybe the good guys aren't going to win. Maybe the good guys don't win at the end of this movie. Our protagonist dies.
Yep.
He gets killed. He also is our protagonist and murders somebody.
So cold, and it's so cold and matter of fact and even journalistic. The way it ends with like a series of photographs.
What's good? Who are the good people in this movie?
Well, I mean, if you kind of hang your cause on the idea that good will triumph over evil, what happens when you lose? Does that mean you were on the wrong side?
That you were evil all along?
That all along that you weren't on the right side because you didn't win? And I think that's what
people were terrified of with the war at that time, is they started hearing all these reports of the terrible things going on in Vietnam, mm-hmm. they started to say, wait a minute, I thought we were
there
saving
for. I
people.
thought we were there under noble pretense.
I thought we were helping people.
You know,
are we
under-
actually like Vikings going out and raping and pillaging? Are we conquering people?
Yeah, exactly. Are we conquering Vietnam?
What
or
are
are we
we
trying
doing?
to, rather?
Are we the bad guys? And so, I mean, this movie definitely makes those statements. Definitely. Our heroes at the end, the militia, they look like a lynch mob.
Yeah.
And
And they're the closest thing we have to
the good that prevails.
Yeah. Is that it? Is that our good? Are
That's our
those our
good?
heroes?
Right. So
that's our saving grace.
So politically, in that context, that's important. So we've set the stage. Now we've got the news that's going on in this household, that they're all gathered around just like every American family would be in the evening at this time, sitting there watching their news about the Vietnam War. And the tone, the pacing, the shocking nature of the news that we're watching in this movie is so familiar to the audience already, because it's just like the Vietnam War reports. They even refer to things like the search and destroy operation and things like
They
that.
use vernacular from the time.
Now, what's great about it is that all of this is made so much more realistic because of the news reporter, the newscaster himself. Which
we're going to see in the scene after Ben beats the shit out of Harry right
Yes,
here.
here we go.
Which is
With
just glorious.
Just
Kicking his ass
kick
all
his ass,
through the house.
which he deserves because Harry locked him out of the house, wasn't going to let him in.
Yep.
So the news reporter is a real reporter, and he's a guy who was covering the Vietnam War, clearly, and he wrote his own copy for this movie because of budget constraints. So he used the language that he was using in his everyday work.
It makes it real.
It makes it real.
Now, this moment, starting from this moment, and it's very
The
brief.
music.
The music changes. It changes from the Hollywood bombast. It changes from the stock music used from some
As they're feasting here
sci-fi alien
on Todd and
movie
Judy.
about
Todd, Tom.
teenagers from outer space from a couple of years prior. But it changes to something atmospheric,
And it's wonderful.
to something where what instrument is this?
Yeah.
What is it's just an electronic hum. It sounds like
This
it sounds
really
like an
deep,
amplifier
low
that's
note.
plugged in and nothing's really coming through it except white noise.
Yeah.
And it's unsettling.
Yeah.
It's unsettling.
It is. I love it.
And we're watching these actors eat this, meat, some of which is actual animal meat. We saw some intestines. Those were cow intestines. We saw a liver. That was a cow's liver. These actors really putting this raw guts in their mouth.
Such dedication.
It's amazing.
I just love it.
Where are their
Today
Oscars?
they'd be like suing people because of salmonella poisoning
yeah,
and stuff.
something. Can't be bothered with that in an independent production. You put your actors through all sorts of shit.
So the other thing that you commented on about, you were talking earlier about the way this movie looks, where it kind of looks old. It kind of, even for the time, it kind of looks a little...
I guess as a blanket statement, of course, it looks dated, but
Right,
as
because
far
it
as
is not
filmmaking
1968
technique
anymore.
goes, I don't think it looks
No,
very
I'm
dated.
talking about the fact that we're using handheld cameras, that
Right,
the
yes,
film
yes,
is
yes.
kind of grainy. Now, what's really great about this, and again, this is the kind of thing you can only appreciate after it's been, a bunch of years later,
Yeah.
and you're talking about this movie through the eyes of history. Variety magazine in '68 came out with this really negative, disparaging article about this movie and said that the movie looked like 20-year-old army stock.
Oh.
And you look back at that now and you think, it's newsreel.
20 years, yeah.
That's what this movie is. It's
you
Vietnam
know what that is?
newsreel.
That's viscerality. That's what this is it makes this movie visceral. That's what they're commenting on. Whether or not they realized it, but when they made that statement criticizing the movie for it looking that way, what they're saying is, this looks real.
It looks real.
This looks like something that's happening somewhere in the world.
It's like the first couple of times we got some of our handheld modern stuff with Blair Witch and whatever can be said about that movie. But the one thing that certainly can be said is we were all like, oh God, this is like a camera that I own, that I have, that, maybe I would use it as poorly as these people are using it. So it's just some of the stuff that I think is being said about the Vietnam War, I think is definitely here. Now, Romero says that critics read too much into the creations they are studying, as he puts it.
Right.
However, in 1995, he came out with a quote where he said, "This movie came out of the anger of the times. No one was gleeful at the way the world was going, so these political themes were addressed in the film. The zombies could be the dead in Vietnam, the consequences of our mistakes in the past, you name it." And
I even just sitting here, I've talked about how they could be the communists next door.
repression and revolt of the 60s.
I mean, they represent fear. They
Right.
represent fear of many, many things.
Now, here's a really cool theory about the zombies specifically. I read an essay called "Lost Bodies, Lost Souls: Night of the Living Dead and Death Dream as Vietnam Narrative" by Karen Randall. And Karen believes the undead, who are present in body but absent in soul, represent the MIA and POW soldiers whose absence was a continually validated presence within the public sphere in 1968. Now, what's interesting about that is the term "living dead" specifically. Think about those words, right? Living dead, and we're talking about POW soldiers, MIA soldiers. Living dead is a term that means declared or assumed dead, but possibly alive somewhere else in the world.
That's interesting.
That's the way
Wow.
she takes it. Pretty cool, huh?
That is very interesting. So now on the news, we're seeing here our militia that is run by. Did you see the cigarette there?
Yes.
There was a cigarette. Not only that, but the guy who's in control.
He has 3 cigars.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The guy in charge, the police chief, wearing plain clothes, has 3 cigars in the band of his hat.
Yeah. Cigarettes are a symbol of power in this movie. Tobacco.
I think you can back that up. I think
that's
I think it's totally supportable.
valid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
you were talking before about how the reporter here wrote
Too
his
bad
own
they're all
copy.
going to die of lung cancer.
Well, yeah, well, they're controlling their own fate. You got to die of something.
True.
So the reporter here wrote his own copy because he was a real life journalist. He also hosted a late night horror movie program on this local Pennsylvania.
This news reporter?
Yeah, this news reporter on the local Pennsylvania not police station TV channel.
Right.
And while he did that, he would plug this movie. He would
Hold on. This line is maybe my favorite
This
line in the movie. Are they slow moving? Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Well, the police chief's lines are all ad-libbed.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he did a great job. This is really naturalistic. This is very kind of cinema verite. It's, the cinema of the real. It's amazing. But this guy would plug Romero and his cast and crew's work in Pennsylvania. Actually, the first movie shot in Pittsburgh.
Really?
Yeah. But he would host this late night horror movie program, and he would say, I'm introducing this movie, but there are people in our backyards, on the ground making a movie. They're doing it for real, right out here, and it's called Night of the Living Dead, and it's going to come out, and you should go see it.
That's really cool.
Contributed in some small part to this movie being seen at some point whenever it came out. But that's very cool. I like that a lot. And, the help that they had from...
He does a really good job playing a reporter.
Yeah, I wonder why. All the help that they got, all the help from the police that they got is really just kind of makes you feel good. Makes you feel good that people would come out and help with this kind of thing. They called up the local police and said, "Hey, we need a couple of cops out here. We're shooting a movie. We need a police car. Would you guys be willing to, let us use you guys for a little bit?" And they were like, "Yeah, of course." And they brought out a paddy wagon, a couple of squad cars, a bunch of cops in uniform, their dogs, they're
awesome.
the canine unit, all these weapons and everything. They just went all out for this little production.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, in your experience, that kind of stuff happened to you when you were in college, too,
absolutely.
right?
When me and my friends would make our dumb little movies, we'd roll up to the campus police department and say, "Hey, we need a shot with some police lights in it. Can you, turn on your lights for a little bit and let us shoot for like 10 minutes?" They're like, "Yeah, of course." Turn on the car, flip on the lights, and we'd do our little scene and then move on. So, yeah, in my experience, you just ask for help, and people just
like movies,
Yeah.
and they like participating in them.
You say to someone, I'm making a movie, would you help me in some small way? Only you can help me do this particular thing.
Well, and people are also, let's be real, people are vain, and they're
Yeah, of course.
they're hoping that maybe your little silly college movie will become an indie hit, and then their cop car will be in it. So, right, like, that's cool.
But the people in this movie became damn legends.
Yeah.
And so this is the scene where Harry gets the gun from Ben. Ben swiftly takes it back from him in this moment.
See Helen
And
doing
Helen
nothing.
just does nothing.
And that's why. And
Do you think it has more to do with Helen?
hoping that he'll die, maybe?
Well, I think that what that actually shows is that Helen is conflicted about helping her husband.
Okay, that's true.
Because we've seen earlier that they have problems in their marriage, and that she doesn't agree with the choices that he makes. So when he takes the gun from Ben, and she's stuck there saying, do I help
That's
my
true.
husband do something that I don't want him to do, or do I help a man kill my husband?
That's true.
I mean, I think
You're making a very valid point
I
right
think
now
it- I
about
think
my
it is-
judgment of Helen.
I think it is pretty valid. Yes, she does kind of remain inactive in that moment, but I think that there's a reason behind her inaction.
True. I think so. Just like I think that there is possibly thematic reasoning behind Barbara's inaction. Judy's dumbness, however, I don't think there's any reasoning behind.
No, she's
My jacket's caught.
Oh, dear.
so
But,
so poor Helen is being
and here Barbara's going to have her moment where she kind of wakes up for a second,
yeah,
and she's going to get up to help Helen.
and she's gonna, and that this will complete her arc.
Yes.
Where she has gone from being inactive, she's gone from a catatonic state and realizing that, someone needs her help. And this is her moment to kind of redeem herself. She does have a moment of redemption.
And
This is one of the more famous moments in the movie, the scene of matricide, where Karen,
And
the young
patricide.
girl, and
Well,
no, he died. He died from,
before.
We talked about this before.
We assume he falls down. I mean,
right. He
we
gets
don't know
shot.
his true moment of
he
death.
gets shot by Ben. He goes down into the cellar and falls over next to his daughter. And the next time we see her, she's feasting on him.
Yeah. And
And
then
then-
here's a very psycho
Yeah,
moment.
it is kind of a psycho moment.
with a trowel.
And Helen comes down, and she is now being stabbed with a trowel by her zombie daughter.
And I love that so early on from the get-go in zombie movies, the zombie child thing was a thing. That from the get-go, this image of a child doing these terrible things. I'll never forget in one of my images from the Dawn of the Dead remake that has stuck with me to this day is when they pull out of the driveway or something very early on in the movie, there's a little girl, or maybe she's in the house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's like
It's
the first
really
zombie.
upsetting.
It is really upsetting.
Children in zombie movies can be just awful.
There's some dumb stuff in the movie. Do you remember the zombie baby?
No.
Yeah, the woman delivers.
Maybe.
Gives
Yes.
birth to a
No.
zombie
Now
baby.
I do.
There's some dumb
Does it
stuff.
look as awesome as the zombie baby in which Freddy was it? Remember, like it's like the little mini.
Oh, the mini Freddy?
Yeah.
The little baby Freddy? Which
Yeah.
one was that? That was the Dream Child.
Yeah. Oh man, that movie was
Number 5, I
just
think.
awful.
Piece of shit. So Ben's taking care of business here with Karen. He's going down into the cellar now, and this was his last resort. Everyone else is dead. Well, almost. He's going to go down to the cellar. He's going to find Harry.
Dead or living dead.
Yeah, dead or living dead. And I think we did miss the moment where Barbara was taken away because she sees her brother as a zombie, and she's overcome.
And just loses it again.
Just loses it.
Again. She has one brief moment of being not catatonic, and then she just goes back to it.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, Ben is going to board up this door that the zombies are trying to beat down, go down into the cellar, and he finds Harry, who's starting to come back as a zombie, takes care of him, sees Helen, who's starting to come back, takes care of her, and then holds up for the night.
I think there is something to be said in the fact that the media throughout this movie has been propagating this advice of hide, board up your house and hide from the things that are scaring you, that are making you uncomfortable, that are coming for you, whatever. And that Ben is the character who doesn't want to hide. He wants to fight it. The things that make him upset, uncomfortable, that he fears, he wants to fight them, and he wants an escape route to get away from them. But in the end, because of other people's actions, he's overwhelmed and he has to hide too.
Yeah.
And because he has to hide, in the end, he's going to die.
Oh, I didn't say this before, but in the original script, the original idea was for Harry to die of the gunshot wound and then come back as a zombie and start eating his daughter.
Oh,
and then
great.
Helen comes downstairs and sees Harry eating their daughter. But they decided not to do that because they thought that was maybe a step too far.
They thought it was too far?
Too much, yeah.
There's no such thing.
With all the stuff they do in that, like, you hear about that and you're like, too far, really?
Too far, really?
I don't think
You guys
that's
thought
much
that was
worse
too
than
far?
anything else that happens
No,
in this movie.
Not really.
But yeah, of course, this movie was condemned by the Catholic Church. It was condemned by fundamentalist religious organizations
Oh, of course.
all over the country, because of course it was.
All the most fun things usually are.
So, but yeah, it's what was that thing you said before about who said that Philip Pullman? Yeah,
The best way to get children to read books is
tell them they're banned.
tell them they're banned books.
I'm sure that this
It's
movie
a
was
terrible
I don't
misquote,
know
but
exactly when and where, but
maybe even mislabeled.
I would not be surprised to hear that this movie was banned in some countries.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm
It
sure
had to
was.
have been.
You
Of
know,
course.
it's probably still banned in some
Very
maybe
likely.
more backwoods countries. So it's the next day, and we're going to see the militia kind of, in a kind of a gross show of power, in a show of power that you don't really see in this movie up to this point. So much so that I think it's shocking when they show you how much power the militia has over the zombie force. It's kind of frightening because you see how much power the zombies have in large groups, and then you see this militia walk in with their guns and just wipe them out like they're no problem. And you realize how much more powerful.
They make jokes about it.
Yeah, they make jokes about it, you know, another one for the fire and all that kind of stuff. Very, very loose, almost as if they enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Like there's some part of them that's
Absolutely.
like, wow, we get to hunt people kind of. Isn't
Yep.
that cool?
Well, and that's definitely a theme that's continued in modern zombie lore today, in all of its forms, whether in literature or film or games or whatever. You often have characters who like it a little too much, who are their moral standards and judgment are questionable.
Well, the canine unit that comes out and they bring the dogs, the fact that the dogs are German Shepherds is just immediately...
And we're not that far out from World War
not that far
II.
out from World War II, all things considered, and it immediately brings to mind images of Nazis with dogs sniffing out hiding Jews
Yeah.
to take to concentration camps. And it's troubling.
So that paired with the fact that our protagonist, who they're about to gun down, is black and that they look like a lynch mob. I mean, all those factors. This house out here in the country really, to me, it's so striking to me because it looks so much like houses out where I went to college in Pulaski, Tennessee, which is the home of the KKK. That's where it was founded. So this house, it really looks like a lot of the stuff way out in the country back there, and makes it so much more real to me. This little farmhouse, kind of overgrown. And there was a scene early on in the movie where Barbara, when she first went up the stairs, she found the body on the landing and she freaked out. And one time for fun, a lot of times me and my friends would go out on the weekends and we'd go explore some of these old abandoned farmhouses out in the country. And in a very similar looking farmhouse to this one time, I was trying to be brave and was going to go up these rickety falling apart stairs, which I shouldn't have been going up. And as I turned up onto the second floor landing, there was, in a very similar fashion, a dead animal at the top.
Ugh.
I don't know what it was. Some very large dead animal, maybe a big dog or something. I don't know what got in there. And its face was like, its decomposing face was like right level with my line of eyesight. And just like Barbara. However, I did not go into a catatonic state and start screaming or faint or anything. I just
This is really troubling.
didn't go upstairs.
Like the fact that they're lined up like a shooting squad. There was a
Yeah.
shot there where they were lined up like a firing squad committing an execution, and they're all
and
firing.
we're so hopeful.
Yeah,
We're so hopeful right now because
as troubling as this is, they're here to save the day. They're here to save Ben. They're here to save the last survivor.
they're what we've been waiting for. We've been saying people are going to come. Ben was of the opinion that maybe nobody's going to come. We've got to save ourselves. But everybody else was of the opinion that no, people are going to come. If we board ourselves, well, not everybody, but Harry in particular was of the opinion if we board ourselves up and hide like they told us, they will come and save us. And they don't save Ben.
No.
Just like he thought, there was no reason to rely on them. There was no reason to trust that someone was going to come save him in the end.
And Ben is dead. So, was Harry right? Do you think they would have survived if they went into the basement?
What? Well, I mean, Ben didn't.
Well, no, he didn't. But would they have gone into the house if they had just stayed down there and the militia?
If they had
gone
all
into the-
stayed down there, well, we would have had to deal with the fact that their daughter would have turned into a zombie while they
would
were
have had
down
to
there.
deal with that, and that would have been a completely different kind of struggle because the daughter turns and then someone's got to deal with it, and it's probably going to be Ben,
And
and that's
maybe
going to
somebody
cause a
else
problem.
gets killed because they deal
Yeah.
with the zombie. Maybe
But yeah,
someone
like-
else gets bitten.
Like I said before, this ending here is just so
The
cold.
these photos.
I said it before, journalistic. It feels
Yeah.
journalistic to me, as though it's documenting something
like
that's
it's
actually
real,
happened.
like it's newsreel.
But like journalism, like something that is truly journalistic and unbiased in nature, it feels cold and neutral, like
I mean, it is
nihilistic.
especially
even like
with
it has no opinion about what's just happened.
especially with the guns, with the helicopter, with the ammo strapped across their chests. It gives you images of war. It
Yep.
gives you images of war journalists.
But
Very, very
very troubling.
troubling. And people were so upset.
And on that happy note, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Popcorn Poops podcast. Although right now, for the month of October, we are the Pumpkin Poops podcast. You can find us still at our website, www.popcornpoops.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, where you can follow us. We'll give you little hints about what movies we're going to be are going to be coming up, and if you can guess them from the screenshots or from the quotes that we post, then you're a true blue movie fan. And you can also subscribe to us on Twitter. Please leave us a rating and a review there. We'd really appreciate that. And you can also find us individually on Twitter. I'm at Dusty Cram Cram.
I'm at Jesse Casper.
And until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.
We are the Pumpkin Poops.
Hi, I'm Mike White,
And I'm Rob St. Mary.
and we're the hosts of the Projection Booth podcast.
If you haven't heard of the Projection Booth, that's okay.
But we think it's time that you have,
We've been doing this for over 3 years now.
and we think we're doing a pretty good show.
Every week we look at a different film and put it in context,
We try to bring you interviews with the people behind the films.
or experts on a subject matter covered in the film.
We don't specialize in any one particular genre or type of film.
We try to examine every aspect of cinema.
From every corner of the globe.
Even at 3 years, we barely just scratched the surface.
But we're ready. We're ready for you to listen to us.
That's right. Now's the time to give us a shot.
Download us through our free smartphone app
Or through Stitcher, iTunes, Geek Juice Radio, Jackalow,
or our website.
projection-booth.com.
We'll keep making great shows.
Now it's your turn to listen to them.